Hello everyone, and welcome to Autocrat. This is a bonus episode and an In Other News special about Japan's first emperor. It's also a solo narration episode, but regular programming with the two co-hosts should be back quite soon. Anyway, in our current discussion, in our regular episodes, we have reached the reign of Tullus Hostilius. He's the third, or maybe fourth, king of Rome, who took over the reins of power in 672 BCE, following the death of Numa, and will, spoiler alert, keep ruling until 640. However, this means he rules during a very important year when it comes to world history, or at least world origin stories. Namely, he's around in the period when Japan, according to tradition, gets its first emperor. This is Emperor Jimmu, who becomes Emperor of Japan in 660 BCE according to tradition. Now, let's explore the story of Jimmu a little bit. Apparently, whether he actually existed is less important than the fact that he has been stamped onto the Japanese collective consciousness. Bear in mind, in terms of chronology, that Jimmu is supposed to have lived between 500 and 600 years before writing was actually introduced to Japan from China. Also note that Jimmu is a posthumous title. His birth name was actually Iwarehiko no Mikoto. And I should say at the outset, apologies to our Japanese listeners if I mangle any of these pronunciations. So, Jimmu was the great-great-grandson of a certain Amaterasu, who was herself the daughter of Izanagi and Izanami, the first couple who created the Japanese islands themselves. The era before Jimmu is known as the Age of Deities in Japanese history, or the Jindai. Jimmu's great-great-grandmother Amaterasu is, by the way, the sun goddess. There is a mythological story about her where at one point she hid in a cave due to a disagreement with her brother Susanoo, so the world had no light and the gods had to come together to entice her out. One of the so-called Japanese imperial regalia is in fact an 8-hand mirror which was used to draw Amaterasu from her cave. The story basically goes that the dawn goddess Ame no Uzume danced on a bucket with the mirror hung in a tree and, a bit of a warning here, basically did a striptease on it. The other gods laughed, and so Amaterasu crept up to the edge of the cave to see what the noise was about. She then caught sight of herself in the 8-hand mirror and was momentarily rooted to the spot. Another god then hastily blocked off the cave, and Amaterasu subsequently agreed not to hide her light anymore. Speaking of these imperial regalia, another one of them is a pendant that was also hung on the same tree while Ame no Uzume was dancing. The last one is the sword Grass Cutter given to Amaterasu by her brother Susanoo. These three treasures combined were given to Amaterasu's grandson Ninigi as part of his efforts to bring order to the world. This Ninigi was the ancestor of Jimmu. A 1944 History of the World notes that Japan is supposed to be under the protection of Amaterasu, ancestress of Jimmu, and in fact each emperor after him. The rising sun of Amaterasu is in fact the symbol on their flag. So, to get into a bit of a biography, Jimmu himself was the fourth son of his parents. From the age of 15, so 697 BCE incidentally, he was his parents' heir, although he was the fourth son, as he was sharp-witted and determined. When he was 45 years old, he led an invasion of the East along with his siblings. As far as I understand it, this "the East" refers to Japan itself. As I said, Jimmu became Emperor of Japan in 660 BCE. Now, he died at the age of 127 in 585 BCE. Accordingly, we can calculate the beginning of this invasion to 667 BCE, meaning there are 7 years between the beginning of the invasion and his assumption of the imperial dignity in the city of Yamato. Jimmu established his imperial court at Yamato, and established what the roles of the various individuals at court were, strengthening imperial power. When Jimmu ultimately died in 585, his eldest illegitimate son sought to take power for himself. However, the eldest legitimate son of Jimmu became aware of this, and alerted his younger legitimate brother to the plot. This younger brother then shot their illegitimate half-brother. Accordingly, the eldest legitimate son offered this younger legitimate brother the throne, and he thus became Emperor Suizei. Jimmu ruled, as I said, from 660 to 585, being succeeded by Suizei. This would be a rule of 75 years, which, even by the standards of Roman kings, would be very impressive. He was buried at a place called Unebi, and in 1890 the Japanese government erected a shrine on the supposed site of his burial. Incidentally, as a final fun fact for today's episode, the current Emperor of Japan is Naruhito, the 126th Emperor. He traces his descent back from Jimmu. In fact, in this tradition, Jimmu is in the male line his 70th great-grandfather, at least if I've done my maths correctly. So, that gives you a bit of a flavour of what, at least according to mythology, legend and tradition, is going on at around the same time as Tullus Hostilius is reigning in Rome. Don't worry, regularly scheduled programming and Roman history will be back soon, along with my co-host. In the meantime, thank you all very much for listening. Feel free to get in touch with us at the show's email address if you have any questions or comments. And until next time, have a great week, everyone.